Hello chess friends and welcome to the Art of Chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit series. So in this series we're covering some great lines and some good defenses after the first moves d4, d5 and then with c4. We have talked about many great opportunities for white, great opportunities for black. We have analyzed for instance the Queen's Gambit decline, the semi-Slav setup, the Slav defense and similar ideas. Today we're doing again the Slav defense but with the so-called Alekhine variation. The Alekhine variation is a provocative idea by white. I think it's more provocative and it's a more aggressive idea of white to somehow beat the Slav defense, but I still think there are good counterplay ideas for black, and there are also, I think, huge blunders that you can make in an early stage of the game. And first, in this Alekhine variation, we're doing the common mistakes, I think, by black that black can make, and I think from that point on, if black makes, I think, the common mistake, white has a comfortable game. White can beat black immediately with great tactics. So let's check out now what's the difference between the Alekhine defense and Alekhine variation and some other variation of the Slav defense. So d4 is of course our first move, d5, c4, c6 the Slav defense. So knight to f3, knight to f6, knight to c3, the three knights variation. And now as I recommended also to you in my previous videos, the best way I think here for black is simply to proceed with the move d takes c4. And there is now this Alekhine variation. We have talked about the Alekhine variation. I think it's the best way for white now to proceed, preventing this b5 move. And there are now also some other possibilities for white, but actually one of the most aggressive methods to beat these structures is the Alekhine variation with the move e3. And it seems okay, you can say, okay, this is not a huge difference, this is not a dramatical change in the position, but actually this e3 move is a very provocative move of white. White is trying now basically to force black to play the move b5, and the move b5 is of course protecting our pawn chain here, c6, b5, c4. So black is trying to rely simply on this extra pawn. And actually, this is good for black. Black didn't make a mistake so far because white, of course, will try now to play this move a4. So the difference between the Alekhine variation and the Alekhine variation is that we're delaying a little bit the move a4. We're trying to force black to play the move b5, and then we're trying now finally to break the position on the queen side with the move a4. The best way, we're not analyzing this line today, but in my opinion the best way for black is simply to proceed with the move b4. b4 is of course as we talked about recently also in some Galler Gambit lines. If you, as I said, if you want to maybe study this the Slav defense more, please also watch my previous analyzed videos because we have talked about similar structures, similar tactical and positional ideas. So after move b4, white has to retreat now to b1, and the game can be played now for both sides. So as I said, in the continuation of the series we're analyzing also this particular line, but there is one, I think, huge mistake that black can make. So black can maybe play here the move knight to d5, and knight to d5 is actually a disaster because what black is hoping here for is after potential a takes b5, then maybe here to take simply first the knight on c3, b takes c3, and then black can maybe rely on this position and play the move b5, and everything is perfectly fine. But that's actually not so, because white doesn't have to play after move knight to d5, doesn't have to react here. That's the main issue, because with the move knight to d5, I think black has broken a little bit the basic principles in chess. So the basic principle in chess in development says you shouldn't play basically with your same piece twice in the opening. So with the move knight to f6 and knight to d5, black has already played with the same piece twice. So let's break also then from white's perspective the basic principles in chess, because black has broken the basic principle. Now we're breaking it too by playing simply the move knight to e5. And actually knight to e5 is here a great continuation for white, because we're liberating now the long diagonal for the queen. The main goal here now is after potential knight to c3, queen to f3 could come, and then we could have a double attack around the square f7. We could attack the pawn f7, but also if the position gets cleared somehow, let's see now possible continuation, maybe here something like knight takes c3, we can play b takes c3, and for instance if you try something like e6, this could be very bad, because after a takes b5 you see c takes b5, queen to f3 could come, and there's no way to protect the rook, there's no way also to protect your f7 score, so you lose immediately this position. So that's why after the move knight to e5 you see many times now this line, knight takes c3, b takes c3, but now with the move queen to d5. And again, it seems so okay, black is holding this position, black is cemented the queen in the center. You cannot play e4. If you play f3 e4, it seems a little bit too slow. Then we can play maybe even f6, trying to kick away the queen. Maybe we can play bishop to f5 and similar ideas. But after move queen to d5, you actually have now some great tactics. We're playing again a takes b5. After c takes b5, now bishop to e2. We're attacking simply now the long diagonal. Now the serious threat is of course to move bishop to f3. Bishop to f3 is winning the game. If you take of course also the pawn on g2, we're playing simply bishop to f3 and you lose too much decisive material. So this move, knight to d5, let's go back, is an idea of blacks to simply somehow hold this position in the center, but it's actually a disaster. So you should be familiar, I think, with white of this particular line, because I faced many times this particular line and I had good success in this particular setups. After move knight to d5, as I said, my recommendation is simply to go knight to e5. Here, knight to c3, b takes c3, and many times, as we said, you'll face simply the move queen to d5. Now a takes b5, c takes b5, and now bishop to e2, bishop to f5. So this is now sort of a cornerstone position that we're searching here. I found a great game in this particular position between Vladimir Raicevic against Josip Rukavina. Here white tried the move rook to a5, and the rook to a5 is actually the top engine move. I really want you now to memorize this particular line because it's so aggressive, it's so great. We're down a pawn, of course our g2 pawn is saying, but it's actually not a problem. All of the pieces now of whites are playing in perfect harmony. The serious threat of the move rook to a5 is now to play simply bishop takes c4, because the queen is pinned on the 5th rank. And here black tried now the move a6. You see now this idea, a bishop to c4, but what black was hoping for now is this move queen to g2, because now the bishop cannot play anymore here to f3, and we're not vulnerable to some attacks on this long diagonal. But white has of course some counterplay with the move bishop takes f7. So you see how white pieces are very well coordinated. Here king to d8, now king to e2 is also perfectly fine. We don't have to castle anymore. The queen is endangered here. The bishop can come to a3. The queen, I think, can be improved. The queen can participate in the attack, and basically if you notice, all of the pieces of white now are playing in this attack. So that's all possible because of this dubious knight to d5 move. As I said, it's not the best way to proceed for black. Here after move knight to d7, rook to g1 attacking the queen, queen to b7, and here Vladimir Raicevic played bishop to a3, king to c7, and now knight takes d7, bishop to d7, and now even the queen comes into the game. Look, this passive setup of blacks, it's really not a good position. Queen to b6, we have bishop to b4, we have e6, and now you see another rook lift. Great game here by white. We have rook to g5, although you could have also proceeded with the move d5. D5 is actually the suggested move by the engine. After trades of pieces, after trades of pawns, we can include our queen into the attack, but actually rook to g5 is also perfectly fine because we're now including all of our pieces in the attack, and you see now the king on e2 is perfectly fine. So here g6, we have rook to e5, bishop to d6, bishop takes d6, and finally white has the pawn back. Now after rook to e8, rook to c5, you see it's a very tricky position here for black. King has to move, bishop takes, queen to d7, queen to b4. Here after the move rook to f8, h3 was played, rook to e8, and now after c4 here in this position black immediately resigned. There is simply too much pressure against the king on b6, the pin on the b file, the rooks are dancing around black's king, so it's simply a position that you have to resign. So really wild stuff. Let's go back. I think this is a great approach. After move knight to d5 in the Alekhine, simply knight to e5, knight takes c3, b takes c3, queen to d5, and now a takes b5, c takes b5, bishop to e2, including our bishop into the game, bishop to f5, and now rook to a5. That's actually the stunner. I'm not seeing good ways how black should proceed here. There is also maybe a different approach what black could do here after again the move e3, b5, a4, knight to d5, and now knight to d5, knight to e5, again knight to c3, b takes c3, and then if you face again this move queen to d5, we're trying again a takes b5, c takes b5, and now you could play immediately the move rook to a5. You don't have to maybe even spend time here with bishop to e2, bishop to f3, although these are also very good moves, and you can face now maybe this idea here, rook to queen to b7, and it seems so that black has defended and everything, because the b5 pawn is protected, everything is glued together. We can now maybe finally play e6, bishop to e7, and even castle. But actually, again, this position is simply a disaster for black, because you have now a new stunner. I really want you to memorize this line. It's really a great tactical line. After move queen to b7, here actually it's possible to sacrifice the rook. Rook takes b5, queen to b5. We have decoyed the queen to b5, but now bishop to c4 comes with the tempo, queen to b7, and now after bishop to f7, the king has to move. And I found a great game in this particular line in the database. It's a game played by Alexander Evdokimov against Yang Shen. The problem is now that actually white lost this game because white didn't play now the best next move. White should have simply proceeded with castling, and after something like bishop to d7, now bishop to a2 followed with knight to f7 is a serious threat. Even if you tried something like bishop to e8, if you try maybe to defend here your f7 square, now the centralized pawns are simply storming towards black's king, and I think black is simply lost. Although we're down the whole rook, but this is such a huge pawn storm. I think black cannot handle it, so I think you should go into this particular line because it's very aggressive. You can surprise your opponent with an immediate rook sacrifice. The king is in the center, the bishop will be included in the game, even the queen can be included into the game. So it's, I think, such a bad position. The engine gives here plus 2.5 here for white, although down the whole rook. So as I said, this is the line that you should memorize. Unfortunately, in this game for white, bishop to c4 was played here, and now black had the opportunity to take the pawn on g2, and here after rook to f1, white was never able to castle anymore, and that was a huge mistake. So instead of this after bishop to f7 and king to d8, instead of this bishop to c4, white should have proceeded simply with castling. And look at this pawn structure. Now we have now 3 centralized pawns. The king is endangered now. As I said, after something like bishop to d7, black has to defend this f7, bishop to a2, now simply e4, and maybe something like after knight to c6 we can play knight to d3, d5, as I said, c4, c5. I think white will crush black here with the centralized pawn storm. So as I said, this is, I think, a good way to play in the Alekhine if you want to play the Alekhine. As we said here, after move we're delaying the move a4, we're playing first move e3. The Alekhine variation, as we said, would be the move a4, then b5 cannot happen. That's the main issue, but still black could try here again the move knight to d5, and then we can play e3, and we have basically reached the same position. So I think you should be really familiar with this knight to d5 idea, because you can crush this idea. This is a it seems like a pragmatic idea for black, but actually it's a disaster position for your opponent. So okay, I hope that you realize these ideas, and I hope that you enjoy this video. If you want to study the Slav defense more, please check out my Slav defense series. I've created also the separate playlist of the Slav defense. You can check them out, maybe in order also to get a better understanding of this particular video. And you can also watch my whole Queen's Gambit series with some other defenses like the Queen's Gambit declined, Queen's Gambit accepted, and some other lines of the Slav defense and also of the semi-Slav setup. So okay, as I said, here are the links of these 2 series, and you can check them out. Maybe you can have a great preparation as white and as black, and as I said, you can watch the series. And of course, if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.